7 aloitetaan ajoissa ja pääsetään kohta meidän vierailijaluentoon asialle, mutta muutama sana ensin. Tervetuloa teille kaikille tosiaan tähän toiseen kansainväliseen nopeuskestävyysseminaariin. Mä olen Levolan Mikko ja toimin valmennuskeskuksen johtajana ja saan olla tässä seminaarissa avaajana ja kuuntelijana, jonka on organisoinut alusta loppuun asti Avelisen Marko, joka on sitten alan miehiä tässä nopeuskestävyysalueella. Haluan tuoda muutaman asian esiin tuossa ennen kuin aloitellaan ja annetaan myös puheenjohtajalle puheenvuoro, eli Kemppaisen Jorma toimii tänä iltana puheenjohtajana. Niin, kuten sanoin, tämä on toinen kansainvälinen seminaari nopeuskestävyyden alueella ja jos oikein muistan, niin Avelisen Marko ideoi edesmenneen valmennuskeskuksen johtajan Seppo Haaviston muistoa kunnettaen tämän nopeuskestävyysseminaari. Pajulahdessahan kautta aikoina on monta kertaa kestävyysseminaari ja viime vuonnahan se oli tämä kansainvälinen tai Euroopan Yliopiston järjestämä yhdessä kansainvälinen seminaari. Mutta tämä on nyt jatkoa viime vuodelle ja me haluttiin tehdä myös toinen heti perään tästä seminaarista, koska me voidaan julkistaa tavallaan 2 Sepon unelmaa. Varmasti Sepolla oli aikoinaan muitakin unelmia, mutta varmasti 2 oli yksi tärkeimmistä olivat nämä 2. Ja meillä on nyt tämän seminaarin aikana mahdollisuus esitellä teille molemmat isot asiat, joihin Seppo tietenkin omalla persoonallaan, kyvyllä ja taidollaan hyvin voimakkaasti vaikuttaa. Ja ensimmäinen on Sepon kirjoittama 400 metrin aitajuoksusta lajikirja, joka nyt on valmiina ja painettu. Ja sitä voi hankkia kaikki, jotka ovat kiinnostuneet kyseisestä kirjasta, niin meidän tuolta vastaanotosta 25 € hintaa. Sieltä voi käydä ostamassa. Mä laitan tuosta yhden painoksen jakoon kiertämään tämän illan aikana, niin voitte tutustua siihen lähelle. Mutta sen voin todeta, että mitä itse olen ehtinyt sitä lukemaan, niin Sepon tuntien täyttä tavaraahan se on. No sitten ehkä vieläkin isompi asia Sepon työelämässä oli seuraava hanke, joka valmistui noin kuukausi aikaa sitten, eli uusi Pajulahti-halli. Sepon unelmahan oli se, että se halli olisi ollut 400 metriä pitkä kiertävät radat, jotta olisi voitu aitakierrostakin juosta täysmittaisella radalla. Emme ihan siihen kyenneet, mutta saatiin 3,5 metriä tai oikeammin 340 metriä on tuo ulomainen rata. Uskon, että siinäkin pystytään juoksemaan 400 metrin aitoja, kun siihen tarve tulee. Mutta halli on ollut kuukauden käytössä ja uskon, että omalta osaltaan myös täyttää Seponkin unelmat, kuten niin monen muunkin meidän täällä Pajulahdessa ja toivottavasti myös urheilijoiden, jotka sitä nyt käyttävät. Se on vielä vähän vaille. Muutamia asioita se nyt pitää vielä kehitellä, laittaa tiettyjä torjuspaikkoja vielä parempaan kuntoon ja erityisolosuhteita, mutta perusharjoittelu varmasti onnistuu ihan hyvin. Uskon näin ja palaute on ollut ihan hyvä. Voisi sanoa tässä, uskon, että jos Seppo tuolta pilven päältä katselee tätä asiaa, niin varmasti toivottavasti hän on tyytyväinen ja me voidaan olla tyytyväisiä. Käykää ostamassa kirja, se on hyvä. Samalla, jos olette kiinnostunut vielä uudesta harjoitteluun liittyvästä ohjeoppaasta, on valmistunut uusi pikajuoksu DVD, jonka myös Avelisen Marko on ollut ideoimassa Anatolin kanssa ja Petteri on ollut mukana siinä työryhmässä ymmärtääkseni. Ja he ovat yhdessä rakentaneet tällaisen harjoitus-DVD:n pikajuoksusta. Ja se on just valmistunut, sitä on painettu tietty määrä ja sitäkin löytyy tuolta meidän vastaanotosta samaan 25 € edulliseen hintaan. Sieltä löytyy ja Petteri on tässä vielä huomenna puheenjohtajana ja hän voi vaikka esitelläkin joitakin pätkiä, jos niin aika riittää. Mutta lyhyesti kutsun nyt Kemppaisen Jorman puheenjohtajaksi ja hän saa avata seminaarin omalta osaltaan ja kutsua meidän englantilaisen vieraan luennoisemaan. Kiitoksia.
Kiitos Mikko. Tervetuloa Pikahettiuksujen puolesta kanssa tänne seminaariin, toiseen nopeuskestävyysseminaariin. Mukava nähdä, että täällä on näinkin iso porukka paikalla ja jatketaan tätä Sepon viestiä myös tätä kautta. Toimin tosiaan tämän illan puheenjohtajana ja puheenjohtajan niin tärkeimpänä tehtävänä ehkä se, että pidän tästä aikataulusta kiinni ja ainakin alkukiitos Mikkoon hyvällä mallilla ollaan aikataulussa. Samalla tässä toimin ja jaan puheenvuoroja sitten kun esitykset lähtevät rullaamaan ja vien tätä iltaa sikäli eteenpäin. Mä toivon, että tästä seminaarista tulisi keskusteleva tilaisuus. Kun on esitysten aika, niin kuunnellaan esitykset. Jos tilaa on, niin siinä on hyvä tietysti käydä keskustelua silläkin hetkellä, mutta ehkä keskusteluiden aika on tauoilla, ruokatauoilla. Mutta kun tämä laji on tällainen, niin ei mentäisi maitohapoille kuitenkaan yöaikana, että niin levättäisiin yöt, koska näyttää olevan, että tässä on seminaariohjelmat alkaa jo kello 8 aikaa ja me pitää kaikki olla pirteinä sitten. Ollaan taas sillä hetkellä, että jatketaan päiväohjelmaa. Meillä on ollut iso asia, että saadaan tänne seminaareihin omien kärkivalmentajien ohella myös eurooppalaisia ja maailmanluokan esiintyjiä, valmentajia tänne paikalle ja tätäkin kautta niin tietoisuus siitä, että miten maailman parhaat urheilijat harjoittelevat, miten maailman parhaat valmentajat harjoituttavat lahjakkaimpia urheilijoita ja tätä kautta saadaan lisää tietoa maailmalta ja sellaisia esimerkkejä, mitä me voisimme tehdä ja varmasti myös meillä on jotakin annettavaa meidän vieraillemme. Toivottavasti vähän jotakin muutenkin kuin tämä luminen ja liukas olosuhde. Ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you, Mr. Dakin, from Lavgoro to Finland. As you see, we have snow here, but I hope you can give us your advices and experiences and everything what you have learned as a coach, top coach in the UK. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. It's always an honour to be invited to deliver on the information that I have gained so far as a coach, and I would stress the so far because coach education is an ongoing process. If I thought I had the secret of 400 meter hurdling, I'll be writing a book and it would be on the shelf and there'll be one way. The crucial thing I always think for coaches is always to have your minds open, to be receptive for new ideas, new knowledge, whether it reinforces what you already know.
Next small thing. Täällä on tätä luentoa ei tulkata varsinaisesti, mutta täällä on muutamat kuulokkeet olemassa. Jos joku haluaa hakea, niin oikealta löytyy vielä kuulokkeita muualta kappaleita. Sieltä tulee tulkkaus sitten suomeksi. Interpretation.
Okay. I meant to ask, if I ever lapse into colloquial English or idiomatic English and there is anything you don't understand that I say, please do ask me to clarify. As I say, when I get enthusiastic about a subject, I am likely just to talk and talk and talk. So you must stop me if there are aspects of my presentation you do not understand, whether from a technical perspective or also obviously from a language perspective. So I have absolutely no Finnish whatsoever. And I think when I arrived at Helsinki airport, I'd been asleep on the plane coming over. And I got off the plane and I could just hear Japanese announcements. There were so many Japanese in Helsinki airport. I have not worked out why yet. I thought I'd landed in Narita for some reason. But anyway, first presentation I would like to give you is just an overview of sprint and sprint coaching in the United Kingdom as it currently stands. Britain obviously has a fine tradition in sprinting, but by that we're probably only talking for the last 30 years or so. Growing up as a young child in England, most of the athletics I was aware of was the middle distance exploits of Seb Coe and Steve Cram and Steve Ovett. And to put in context where sprinting is in Britain, I think we have to almost look at what has happened in the last 30 years. And I know one of the questions I was asked to try to give some explanation for was, you know, how do British coaches approach developing speed from a relatively young age to adulthood. And it also got me thinking as we'll go through the presentations here, I do not think that there is necessarily a clear pathway for young athletes to follow. I think it is getting there, but we will talk about those aspects and about those issues as we go through the presentation. As I say, fine tradition from the last, maybe if you go back to Alan Wells winning in Moscow, and suddenly we had an Olympic 100-metre champion, which was, my father was also a big athletics fan. He couldn't remember any similar success for a long, long time. And about 5-6 years later, I think British sprinting, where it is now, owes a lot to Linford Christie. Not just because he was the great athlete he was, the times he ran, the medals he won, but it served very much as a role model. And many of the British successes in sprinting, many of the people who have achieved either World Championship final level or even World Championship medals are from the British Afro-Caribbean population. So I think there is that big role model effect that has come into place in terms of why, over the last 30 years, suddenly Britain has found itself certainly to the forefront of European sprinting, and on occasions, probably up until the last 3 or 4 years, occasionally in touching region some of the Jamaicans and the Americans, but they seem to have gone away again. I think, with my sociologist hat on, it would be very interesting to see if there is a motivational effect by the successes of Christophe Lemaitre in Barcelona last year, well, his whole season last year. He is not just an athlete who is good and will win a European championship. He is an athlete who is capable of winning world-level medals. And as I say, I think my master's degree study was on the sociology of becoming a sprinter. So it is actually an aspect I'd looked into previously, and I'd interviewed athletes such as Mark Richardson, Jason Gardner about their experiences and why they became sprinters. And it was something they felt they could do. It wasn't something they felt, I've got to do this, or I should do this. It was something they felt they could succeed in. And so, allying that to the success of Linford Christie, I think that's had a big part to play in where Britain is now. As I said, growing up, I typically thought that Britain was very much a Harrier nation, what we call a middle distance nation. But sprints has proved the most fruitful area for British track and field over the last 30, 25 years or so, without question. That's a summary of the medal tables that the men in particular have been successful with in the last 25 years. Top table on the left, the Olympic, with 100 metres, 200, 400, and we have won medals in the last 25 years at all of the nations. Not necessarily many in the world, but certainly the Europeans who have been successful. And for me, the crucial aspect of that is the last sentence there. We have 35 medals from 17 different athletes. So although obviously the people who are capable of winning right at the very top of world level athletics, the Linford Christies, the John Reaches are few and far between, there is still a very, very good spread of athletes who believe and deliver on their ability to sprint at a high level. However, if we look at the women's side, it's a very, very different picture. And I think this relates closely to what I want to investigate about coaching. If you have a successful coaching model, should it not be able to work for both men and for women? Or is the coaching of men and women vastly different across different events? So there has been some success. We have still had some very, very good athletes, certainly over the 1 lap, over the 400 metres. But there is not the depth or the scale by any means. And there will be other European countries who have had far more success sprints-wise from a women's perspective. So therefore, when I'm talking about the success of British sprinting, it is predominantly the men's sprinting side. And that may well be affected by who we have coaching particular groups of athletes. If that makes sense. I should add, if anyone has any questions at any stage, please do feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll be done in 40 minutes. So the question then becomes, what are the factors that leads to success on the men's side in particular? Is there a flip side? Why is there not success, maybe for the women? I've mentioned about the traditions. Britain has always loved its track and field athletics. I don't think there is a nation in the world by now that is not overrun, as I like to put it, by football. Football is the all-seeing God of so many countries. But athletics throughout the last century played a very, very big part in British sporting pastimes. And coaching in particular was something that we took a lot of influence in developing, I think, through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And again, in looking at the current success, I will question how much is that due to tradition, how much is that due to isolated pockets or isolated groupings of quality coaching. But as I say, the success of coaching in the 50s and 60s, is that really relevant maybe to the success of today? In looking at, okay, do we have a good coaching system for sprinting? I thought, well, it's good to look to see what happens at our younger age groups. Are we capable of identifying talent, working with talent that produces consistently good performances at all levels on their way through to senior? We certainly have very, very good success at junior level, which is a little bit older than maybe the starting point for this investigation. But again, are those the people who are necessarily going on to win and challenge for major titles at a senior level? Do we have the whole process right from childhood to adulthood? There are very, very, very few names on the British all-time under 15 list who appear on the senior lists anywhere. Mark Lewis Francis has had a checkered career. UK record holder under 15 at 10.93, was probably denied a world record by, well, whether he was denied or not we will never know, but he ran a sub-10 clocking in Edmonton in the 2001 World Championships when still a junior, but as the wind gauge failed, they were unable to ratify whether that was a record or not. And he has almost stalled from that point onwards, probably up until this year, and it was really good to see him have a renaissance and come away with medals both at the European Championships and also later at the Commonwealth Games. Adi Mafi is a British Olympian. Again, he features in the under 15. Probably the only person who has been a British under 15 superstar and has gone on to be a world level force in her sprint event is Catherine Merry. She was a hugely talented athlete, very good multi-eventer. She was at the time British British under 15 record holder for the 100 metres, still is for the 200 metres. And her went on to her crowning point being picking up the bronze medal in 2000 Sydney Olympics over 400 metres. Again, possibly an injury that had its aspects, had its periods where injury prevented a continuous build through of her undoubted talent. And again, shortly after 2000, 2001, she was plagued by injuries and never really recaptured that form. If we move that up a level to the under-17, and bear in mind that Britain tends to have an age group structure that is slightly out of synchronisation, if you like, with many other European and indeed many other world nations. We have an under-15 group, an under-17 group before going straight to juniors and under-20. Again, relatively few people are right at the top of the tree. Athletes such as Darren Campbell, silver medalist in the same Sydney Olympics in 2000, and Christian Malcolm, Pierre, and Donna Fraser, who was fourth behind Catherine Merry in the Olympics, and a sub-57 400-metre runner. Again, it's not superior, but there is not a consistent pattern. There are not the Linda Christies, there are not the, if you look at hers, there are not the Colin Jacksons, there are not the Mark Richardsons, there are not the Ewan Thomases. There are not the Jason Gardners really appearing as successful British sprinters at that age. There's almost two ways we can look at this. Is it that, yes, they were in training? Yes, they were in training, but there was more focus on what they were doing technically rather than what they needed maybe to run fast at that particular time. Or maybe they weren't in the sport. I mean, there are one or two of our best, certainly our best 400-metre runners were involved in other sports. Ewan Thomas was BMX bike European champion. Dave Grindley, who was a European, as well as a British record holder at 44.5, he was playing rugby league. So there are these questions. Are we actually, I don't think, I'll put my hand up and say, well, I don't think we necessarily identify the hugely talented sprinters at an early age. But maybe what we do have is a coaching structure that will then come into place and help develop talent at a slightly later stage that maybe is ideal. But again, you have the same argument, how long is the shelf life of the sprinter? What factors mitigate the shelf life of the sprinter? So that's the conclusion of that section. Very, very small percentage of people who are successful at under 15, only slightly better at under 17. And again, having supper here this evening and discussing some of my Finnish colleagues, they told me that is a fairly similar picture. That is the case here in Finland, that you don't always get the people who are standout athletes at a young age going on to be successful athletes or the more successful athletes at a senior level. So we have a little bit of a conundrum. Big sport in Britain, a lot of participation, but the record book seems to be dominated at 14, 15, 16, 17, not by the people who go on to be good, but either people who are okay, or maybe people in other sports. So where does Britain, from that position, develop consistently good level European athletes and occasionally very good level world athletes? And it may well be, from that perspective, that the specialist or the more specialist environment in which people can focus more on one bent or another does not really come into play until maybe post-school even, so 17, 18, 19 onwards. And so what I want to spend a little bit of time on, and again look at the British structure, is, so how does the coaching structure fit together? The majority of British athletes are developed or have traditionally been developed through the club system in terms of talent identification. If you go back to that period I was talking about in the 50s, the 60s, maybe the early 70s, a lot of athletics development and a lot of skill identification happened in schools. It still does happen, but at a much, much, much smaller level. I think there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that the role of teachers has become much more administratively based. So, as well as all the actual hands-on teaching they must do, there is the need for reports and administrative bureaucracy to be undertaken, rather than, certainly for the PE teachers, them becoming involved with a lot of after-schools clubs or developing the actual playing of sports in schools. Closely allied to that is the fact that physical education, PE, is by now an academic subject at school level, as I'm sure it is in many countries. But again, going back to when I was at school, PE was something you did for the physical prowess, the physical benefits of doing it. And in Britain, it has only become an academic subject probably since the late 1980s. But again, there was a switch in focus of how physical education teachers were approaching their own job. By definition, they had to do what was required of them in their job, and that took away a large chunk, or a large part of the environment in Britain for good athletics practice to be meaningfully taught, not just talked about as an academic exercise or 3 or 4 sessions a term. It was a very, very meaningful education or coaching environment for our school kids. And by now, the majority of athletes' development, I want to say, will happen through the club system. Again, one of the other questions I was asked on this is, can you present an overview on the British method of coaching sprints? I am convinced that by now there are very few countries that would say we have a specific national way of developing a sprint or any event. I think there will be pockets of technical excellence. Biomechanics, good biomechanics are good biomechanics, whether you are Japanese, Australian, Finnish, British, American, whatever you may be. But I believe that the globalization of our world, it is very easy for me, if I want to find out information on how Lance Bauman is training his athletes in America, it's easily done with emails, with internet, with video forums. The information is there. I do not believe that there is specifically a national way of coaching a sprint event. What there will be, and coming into nice warm conditions like we have here, there will be an environmental factor to how sprints are taught. I remember working with a Norwegian 400-meter hurdler who came to Loughborough, I think in 1998 or 99. And I asked her to bring a training diary so I'd have a look at the kind of work she'd done previously. And somewhat naively, I was looking through the diaries and looking at her track work and saying, there is nothing longer here than 80 metres and turnabouts. Why is that? And it was